Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters. My name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps. Colin, good evening. How are you?
Not half bad. How are you?
I'm not sad that we have to talk about a sad episode, but, you know, we'll get through it.
Yeah.
It didn't make me as sad as I thought it would, which is interesting. I think maybe because I was, fully prepared. I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But there are some moments that I got a little teary-eyed, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about this episode in relation to other sitcom episodes where the show in question is clearly moving a character out, right? So, because I think Community clearly does some things that maybe other shows don't. Maybe it's not as saccharine as some of those other shows, because you would be forgiven for forgetting that Troy leaves in this episode, because they do not necessarily talk about it as overtly as you would expect. But John, before we start, we have a new patron.
Oh, my God, Colin. This is big news. Coming hot out of the gate, new patron. It's made me very happy this week. Thank you for your patronage. And I will say, this patron also left a comment. So it's a double whammy, but in the best way possible.
Right.
Who came up with the word whammy, do you think? Do you think it was a gentleman whose name was Stephen Whammy? And he thought, what will I ever be famous for? And then he fell really hard one day. And they thought, you just took a big whammy. And then he got made fun of so much. I don't know. It's a sad guy I've created.
Well, I was thinking maybe his name was Stephen Wham, and they said, "Oh, look at old Whammy over there, can't stay on his feet."
Oh, so he just fell down all the time?
Yeah, he just fell down.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a new patron. Let's talk about this person.
Yeah, so Katana, they're supporting us at one of our producer levels on Patreon, so thank you, Katana. And if you would like to hear your name on the podcast, all you need to do is maybe say something incendiary, or better, support us through Patreon. The link is in the show notes.
And I will read Katana's review at the end of the show. Correct. It's a doozy, or a whammy, if you will. Colin.
Fantastic. Callback. Yeah, we are here to discuss Season 5, Episode 5 of Community, Geothermal Escapism, or perhaps conversationally, the episode when Troy leaves. John, this episode originally aired on January the 23rd, 2014. John, people are leaving, but some people are coming back. Directed by Joe Russo.
Yeah, and the Russo's back. I saw in your notes, this is right after they've directed Captain America Winter Soldier.
Right, so I mean, one can only assume they finished principal photography, because I think that movie released in maybe the summer of 2014, if I remember that correctly. So yeah, but this is what's super interesting is 2014, this was around the time the Russos became these incredibly significant filmmakers. Filmmakers is maybe not the correct way to describe it, but significant figures within the Marvel canon. John, written by Tim Sicardo, this is your IMDb plot summary. As a going-away present to Troy before his around-the-world trip, Abed sets up a high-stakes game of hot lava at the college, but Britta suspects that the game is just masking his real feelings about Troy's departure. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Just big ups to Britta for calling it out the gate is what Britta did. She did a good job this time.
Yeah, I bet we'll talk about this, but this reminds me of something you and I talked about in Season 1, where maybe this show would have been more interesting if Britta was the primary, and this is yet another one of those episodes that gives us a sense of what this show could have been if Britta instead of Jeff was the primary. But also, fantastic summary. John, I smell a bit of Halo. I'll say that much.
We think this is Incognito Halo 1K. I feel
this is Incognito Halo. This is the IH, as some people call it.
Jesus fucking Christ! All right, Colin, let us continue, please.
Sorry, I went very Trump. Speaking about saying things that make you an infamous figure, and then you get your name mentioned. But yeah. He likes to do that, doesn't he? Some people are saying, and it's the wildest thing anyone would ever say.
Some people are saying I have the best hands that's ever been created. Everybody loves my hands.
Some people said Halo came back for this episode. It feels like Halo, sounds like Halo. It's fantastic. We love Halo. Halo's the best.
We
love
don't love the
round
new guy.
things.
We don't
Don't
love
like
the new
the ice
guy.
cream so much, but we love Halo. He gives fantastic summaries.
That's so good.
My favorite thing he does is when it's clear he's forgotten a word, and so he just stops and then says, I guess a word that's vaguely relevant to what he probably wanted to say. Anywho, for a bit of context, on ABC, The Taste at 2.7.
Okay. Got it.
Right, no jokes because of...
No jokes. I don't joke about Anthony Bourdain. He was a lovely man.
Yeah. No jokes. Anthony Bourdain. There's a Bourdain embargo on making jokes about The Taste. On CBS, on repeat, it's Sheldon at 8.
What a great name. They just really, this season, they just dug in. They really went for, they saw everybody just wants Sheldon. Let's give them Sheldon. And that's all they needed for here. They renamed the whole show. Nobody even knew.
No one noticed.
Big Bang Theory, this is what a grandpa or grandma would call the Big Bang Theory. They forgot the name of it.
It's Sheldon.
And they would say it's Sheldon.
I think I told you my grandfather would always refer to, because I worked at a Blockbuster Video, as Blockbusters.
Oh, Blockbusters with an S?
There's no S, but...
There's, I live near Kroger, which is a supermarket, and every motherfucking person I know says Kroger's, as if it has...
I probably say that, yeah.
But, I mean, that is definitely an Appalachian thing. I don't know why.
Yeah.
There is no S, but it's Kroger's.
Do you think it's probably because a lot of before the consolidation of the grocery store, a lot of grocery stores were named after people? They were given that possessive pronoun. I think that's probably why, right?
I would have to imagine, yeah. But nobody says the Piggly Wigglies, but they should.
That's true. Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's good.
Great.
That's pretty good, John. Yeah. On Fox, not the big... Again, It's Sheldon on repeat was the big winner on Fox. American Idol at 7.3.
I think this was Puddle of Mud. Remember that band?
No, I
She
don't.
fucking hates me.
Oh.
Remember that? That weird time in rock and roll when all the music was fucking awful? That's where that band comes from.
And on NBC, Community at 1.9. Regrettably, the big loser, which is doubly sad, because I think John's right. This is something of a pathos-riddled episode. But John, for all of its pathos, I think this is a stunning episode that both harkens back to maybe some of those action-oriented episodes from the past, but also, and I'll talk about this a bit, and we can talk about it more as we move forward this season, offers maybe a potential direction for different character dynamics in the wake of Troy's departure. But I always like this episode. I would love to know what you think.
Yeah, so this is my first time. I watched it twice today, and the first time I watched it, I wasn't super taken with it. I do like what they're doing with the sort of post-apocalyptic, future-apocalyptic storyline they've set. Yeah. We'll talk about what I think influenced it, because I think there's a lot of different things.
References.
I like that a lot. It makes sense why you bring in a Russo. He's good at this. He's good at these big cinematic episodes. The show, at some point, I think this is purposely done. It almost looks like it has a film grain on it in some shots.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I noticed that. Somebody had almost put a little bit of film schmaltz. They had rubbed it all over it to make it look a little bit grainier and dirtier, which is good. I think this is a fine goodbye for Troy. I think Troy does the most heavy lifting, I would say, in this episode. Him and Britta, obviously, but I think he emotionally does a lot of heavy lifting in this episode, especially at the end when he sort of realizes that he wants to go on his own, but also doesn't want to leave this big piece of his heart that he has, grown over these last few years. I really liked the goodbyes. I think they were very well done. They were very sweet and tender. I don't know if I liked Abed's goodbye, but I think it was what was probably necessary for these two. Abed, in the hug, Danny Pudi does great work where he, is realizing that this is it. And then there's that shot of them, of Donald Glover leaving, and you talked about it in our notes. There's this wonderful shot Jeff and Abed looking at Troy leaving, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. As if, number one, now these two men are all that have left of each other, and also they don't know how to leave. They don't know how to get out of this stagnant place that they're in. So that's a very sweet, also sad moment. Overall, I like the episode. I don't think I liked it as much as the previous episode, but I do like what it's doing and the homage it's paying towards a lot of cinema that I truly love a fuck ton. I did not know that's what this was going to be. I knew it was a hot lava episode, but I did not know it was going to take from like movies that I genuinely adore more than I think most human beings should. Like in a healthy relationship with a film, they should not love these movies as much as I do. So this will be fun to talk about, I think.
Yeah, and this is a difficult genre of episodes, I think, for many shows to execute. This is what in recent television, when Steve Carell left The Office.
Sure.
I don't necessarily know if that episode was that good. It was exactly what I suspect people who like the show want, which is all the feelings, right? But I don't know if it moves the narrative forward,
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, this is a great thing to talk about. I'm not a big Office fan. It's fine. I'm not like a diehard person. I watched it when it came out. I think I owned season 3 on DVD. That's like the best season. It's when they're in the stride. It has the dinner party episode, which is the best episode of that show, hands down. It's the one that got the Emmy. It's amazing. But I can remember randomly, if I get in that mood where I really want to cry, I'll hit for some of those Office moments. Because for all its faults, they are good at tugging the heartstrings, but they maybe don't go so subtle with it, and I think that's where Community wins in that. The Office is overtly, we're going to make you sob, and Community is not a show that would ever try to do that. So I think they're doing it their way, versus where like in The Office when Pam shows up at the end and Michael's running off and he takes his mic off and she runs out to say goodbye to him. Fantastic moment. Or when Jim knows he's leaving before he's leaving early and not telling people he's leaving because he doesn't want to deal with the goodbye.
Sure.
Sweet, wonderful moment. Here, it needs to be subtle and goofy because look at what has just preceded it as an episode. They've played Hot Lava for a $50,000 comic book. Like when you say it out loud, it's a little dumb.
It's a little silly.
But they do it the best they can. I think this is Community showing its heart in a way that I don't think it'll get enough praise for what it does.
Yeah.
People will think about, when you think about like goodbyes in sitcoms, you automatically are going to go to when Michael leaves, when or emotional moments, I should say, like when Pam and Jim find out they're pregnant. That's a big one that I can remember distinctly. Sure. But I think this deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, because again, it's a difficult genre of episode to execute. I suspect, and I think even some of the writers for this show have said as much, losing a significant character like Troy changed the way they conceptualize the show. And so when you lose a character like this, not because the show ends, but because maybe the actor in question leaves or wants to leave, I suspect it can feel a bit like a wake in some ways. Because I think as a viewer, you have a variety of different feelings and emotions, right? So you're watching this, but again, it feels less like a kind of episode about the narrative of the show itself and more about these kinds of larger meta questions about what it means for this show as a show. But I think you're right. I think part of what this episode does so well is it's an episode that almost tricks you into thinking that Troy won't leave at the end. So you can actually focus on the story. There's an actual story here instead of, and I think, again, that Office episode, I don't mean to offend anyone, but it's not a good episode of television. It's really just a series of goodbyes. That's all it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't remember anything that happens in it, but I remember those goodbyes. Yeah, yeah.
It's, and in that way, it really does feel like a lot of those episodes of television are perpetually breaking the fourth wall because it feels like the show's winking at its audience because they know what the audience wants or needs or whatever, right?
Sure.
But that's not really what you get here. Again, this is an episode with a real story that explores Abed's motivations for why he even wants to do this, Troy's complex motivations for wanting to leave, allowing Britta to emerge as this reasonable, rational voice who strongly encourages everyone to process their feelings and not just relegate those feelings into a second or third order priority, but really make them the priority. If you were someone making a sitcom and you had a situation like this, I would encourage you just go to this episode and try to do what they do, because I think it's again, maybe from a narrative perspective, far superior to what we often see, which is again episodes with not a lot of stories, but just a series of protracted goodbyes, and that's fine. But I don't know what's the point. I guess maybe I feel like I'm really negging that episode of The Office, and maybe I shouldn't. So
Comparing it to that episode of The Office, I think is fine because, like you said, that episode in particular is like a vignette of goodbyes. Sure, I don't remember a goddamn thing about the story at all. I know he's going to be with Holly. That's all I remember about that episode. But I think you also write a fine line of not being so sad that the audience hates it. You know, the audience remembers how sad they were. And I think think about that versus something that, like, in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I can remember the last episode of that. I watched that when I was, like,
when he turns
teenage,
the lights
probably,
out.
when he turns the lights out to the house, right? There's a story that leads up to this. You know, there's, like, a narrative that gets you there. And, like, that moment, or the moment when his dad won't come see him, is, like, a heartbreaking moment, and Will Smith's really good in that moment, and you just really feel for him, that character. But again, there's a narrative behind it to get there. But it's so heavy that you can't have a joke to pull you out of it. You're just sobbing, you know. And I think Community does a good job, like you said, of writing the complexities of both of those characters quite well in this episode. Not just giving you, here's something to cry about, and then at the end we're going to hit you, you know, a nut kick with a stupid joke. I don't think it does that.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's really this question of commitment, right? And this is the thing that and Britta even says this early in the episode. Community is a show with a collection of characters. Perhaps Jeff to varying degrees. Your mileage varies with Jeff, but it's a show with a collection of characters who always commit to the bit. And that's so fundamentally different from other shows and I think this is where Community feels at times a bit fantastical. There is this magical realist element to this show that just doesn't exist in other shows, because other shows, they're so interested in verisimilitude, it's really hard for people to commit because they feel like us. And at times, that's not the space that Community occupies. So because everyone's so committed to the bit, because everyone's so committed to the conceit, as you said a moment ago, and I think you're absolutely right, it allows you as an audience to, again, forget, perhaps, that this is the episode when Troy leaves. And I think from a narrative perspective, it allows the show to actually have a story instead of, and I like the word you used, vignette, right? It keeps this episode from being just a series of goodbyes and vignettes. And I think this is something that I do recall from that Office episode, where the narrative tension, John, is, will Pam say goodbye? And that's not interesting at all, because
Of course she's going to. She's Pam.
Yeah, it's just
not...
well, but also, like, and I think, well, this is not a Office podcast, but I mean, there's this way that show
not yet, it's not
fundamentally changed Michael Scott as a character, and really encouraged us to forget all of the times that he verbally sexually harassed that woman in the office. So but again, this is not an Office podcast. John, you mentioned the references. I think this is a great place to start.
Okay,
let's talk about the references.
Let's talk about it. I wrote down a couple. Hold on. Let me get my notes. I got a buzz going. I apologize. Here we go. All right, so they make up new names immediately. So, like, I love futuristic shit where immediately they have their own verbiage for things. And here they have like chair walkers, sofa hoppers, Scoot Nanny, the Orb, Shirley's Island, all this weird, insane shit. So this reminds me of, you said Mad Max in the notes. It does. This came out before Mad Max Fury Road, by the way.
It did, didn't
so
it? Yeah.
it's not aping off that, which is the best movie ever made. In case you haven't seen it, I would search it out. It's so fucking good. It blows my mind that movie got made. But it's definitely aping off the Mad Max films in general. You said the Lord of the Rings. I didn't get that vibe.
Can I tell you why?
Yeah,
It's
please do.
Okay, it's a couple of things. It's the score. I think that's part of it. The way
Okay.
they frame Shirley feels like Galadriel at times. Like this idea that
wow.
her it's not, and I mean, I'm sorry, but just the idea of Abed falling in a giant vat of lava. I mean, that shot is remarkably
It reminds
similar
me more
to
of like the Terminator than it does Lord of the Rings.
Okay, that's fair. Sure, I could see that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. That's interesting about Shirley.
And all the
as
mythologizing as well, like the construction of gods and different mythologies, and I mean that was Tolkien's one of his primary preoccupations was really just constructing languages, and then at some point he thought, well, maybe I should have stories for these weird languages that I just made up in my leisure time.
Yeah, I mean, like Chang's group, the Locker Boys, that is like a direct
so funny.
reference to Mad Max stuff. I mean, in the newest, in Fury Road, there's the main one of the main bad guys. There's like 3 different sects of people that come in, but one of them, they're called the War Boys, and they're like the ones who are painted all white and drive like the diesel trucks, and they're fucking awesome. A lot of this reminded me of the Warriors. Have you ever seen the Warriors?
I don't think I have, but I've heard good things about it. I've heard
Yeah,
you
it's
talk
a
about
wonderful
it.
film. I love that film. It's from 1979, maybe.
Okay.
And it is set in a New York that is not unlike our New York, except there are dozens and dozens of gangs. And it is about a gang called the Warriors who are framed for the murder of the head gang chief, basically, of all these gangs. And they have to get from the middle of Manhattan to their home on Long Island in one night without getting murdered by all these different gangs. But the vibe, the clothing, the way they talk, their verbiage, all the different gang names, I got a lot of Warrior vibes watching it. So I think that might have been a little bit of influence. And I also would say like Waterworld, even though that's a movie that I loathe,
Yeah.
I think that has a lot of influence as well.
It's conceptually interesting, and I think that's something you can always say about these quasi post-apocalyptic, maybe it's a bit steampunk, maybe it's a bit cyberpunk at times.
For sure.
Whether it's a film or a movie or what have you, the mileage varies, but the conceit is always super interesting. As you were talking about the Warriors, I was thinking of Escape from New York as well. I think it has some
Yeah,
of those
same
vibes
vibe.
to
Absolutely
it.
same vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting brew because you're right. It has a lot of these maybe late 70s, 80s inspired science fiction subgenre, science fiction influences. But again,
Yeah.
the score, at least I listened to it a couple of times. It was conspicuously odd to me. And again, I mentioned all of the potential like fantasy Lord of the Rings references. But I think this is part of what I like so much about what this episode wants to do with not only having one of the Russos back, but also, again, hearkening back to these action episodes. Thinking of this episode, this goodbye to Troy, as really this messy collage of different references, because my goodness, is that not what Greendale ultimately is? Just this messy collage of different references. Even I think the Dean said this in an early season 1 episode. The composition of the group itself is something of a non-monochromatic, messy brew in the best kind of way. And I think you're seeing that here. There's no consistent conceit. like a lot of the other heavily referential episodes. There's a lot that if you're like John, really interested in thinking through all of these postmodern, playful, referential aesthetics, there's a lot to see here and a lot to find here. And I think equally there's a lot to miss, which is also part of the fun, is having someone say to you, hey, well, this also felt a bit like The Warriors. I've never seen The Warriors. I should go watch that. And then you watch it and your relationship with this episode changes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that's why I was very fond of the episode for that reason. I'm just a sucker. I'm just a sucker for that shit. Like early futuristic cyberpunk stuff and like the first Terminator, Escape from New York, all the Mad Max movies. It's Blade Runner. Oh, come on. Are you fucking kidding me? It's hard to beat that. It's just hard to fucking beat it. It's so good. And they did a great job here capturing that. I guess we should also talk about, though, and this is something that I've always thought was hilarious with these types of episodes, how quickly everything devolves into its own world. Because I assume this has been a couple hours, maybe, since the Deans announced this?
Yeah, how long it takes.
Because it feels like it's been a couple years at this point.
Yeah.
But it's definitely been the same day, because Troy goes so much as to say, my last day here.
Yeah.
Because that's a trigger for Abed. So I don't know where this comes from, but I love it.
Yeah, and again, I think part of this is something I mentioned before, just the commitment, right? And this is something I notice watching my son play and watching him play with because this is something that's actually really quite lovely about children of a particular age. Their level of commitment is something that a proper adult simply does not have, right? Watching my son commit when he's playing with one of his friends to a conceit that they just concoct, it's really quite beautiful to see. And that's also part of what I like about these kinds of episodes, is how they invite all of these characters to play. And even someone like Britta, who operates as the straight man, she finally decides to indulge in this kind of playfulness as well. And we see this with Jeff at times. It's remarkable what the human imagination can do when it permits itself to play. And I think that's what we're often seeing in these kinds of episodes, which again is something that episodes like The Office or shows like The Office have difficulty doing, because there's no sense that those characters have permission to play. I think maybe this is one of the things I'll say about how they change Michael Scott as a character. I believe there was this one episode where he was constantly attempting to encourage everyone to do something like an Old West murder mystery game as a way of distracting them.
Yeah,
from
that's a good episode.
like a branch closure or something. And I think he actually says this to Jim at one point, and it almost sounds like Abed from The Office or Abed from Community infected The Office when he says something like, they don't need the truth. They need this. They need to play. And everyone just indulges, and it works. And again, that's part of what I love about Community so much, is the way it really champions playfulness, the way it champions not attempting to circumvent narratives and stories, but really moving through them as a way of getting to a greater truth. And I think that's how you can create these complex mythologies, is because everyone just agrees, yeah, let's play and see what happens.
We're going to have to bring up something that I think you're not a big fan of. I don't know. I feel like we've talked about this property and you hate it. We have to talk about Peter Pan.
Do I hate Peter Pan?
I feel like you've spoken about not liking Peter Pan before.
Maybe I have, but maybe I'm a different person now, so maybe I'll change my mind.
This, I mean, as we were talking about, like, this is like a Peter Pan story. I mean, it really is. Like,
explain.
Troy is your Peter Pan who doesn't want to, who has to grow up.
Yeah.
Him and Abed, I guess, maybe Abed's his shadow and shares with him and doesn't want him to grow up. Yeah. They literally meet the Lost Boys because Chang has, like, the Rufio haircut, like, from Hook. We've got, I assume maybe Britta's like your Wendy type character, or at some point she even like dons the hair that looks like a Captain Hook hat almost, her big ruffly
Yeah.
hair, you know?
I mean, even like
There's the boat
Hickey.
at the end that he leaves on to go back
Yeah.
to go to maybe his own adult life, you know, and we're left
Sure.
in Never Never Land with Abed and Winger.
Yeah, I mean, even Hickey as the kind of capital A antagonist, he doesn't have a hook, but he has that knife, right? So, I mean, if you think of the hook as a kind of like piercing
does.
object, that's about as close as you can get. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that just came to me, but I think it's there. I think there's enough there that you could maybe make that work. I don't know. I'm drunk. I'm talking out of my ass a little bit.
No, I
Who
think that's
knows?
actually really good, John. And like, I guess maybe this is the thing I don't like about Peter Pan, thinking about it now, is this idea that this the way it wants to separate or delineate between playfulness, which I would associate with narrative and story, and then reality, as if
Yeah.
those two things operate separate from one another. What I prefer to think instead, and I've spoken about this on the podcast, this is something that I've taken from reading Todd McGowan. His point is, you don't circumvent narrative to get to the truth. You must go through it to get to the truth. If you're constantly trying to circumvent it, what are you really? You're just using what he describes as the logic of the rebel, right? Never actually committing. It's only when you commit to something and then process through or work through the process of that commitment that you arrive at some greater truth. So I think, like, I agree with you with all the references. I guess I would just want Peter Pan instead to say, we don't leave Neverland to get to the truth. We embed ourselves deeper in the fantasy of Neverland, and that's how we get to the truth. I think that's what I would want instead. But,
Yeah.
I didn't write that
story.
story.
You have to
so.
circumvent it, Colin.
Circumvent, I think is how
You have to give it the
pronounce
old reach around. No, I agree with you. I think that's a wonderful way to say that. You've spoken about that before, and yeah, I think there, especially at the end, the moments of induced panic in both Troy and Abed lead to this sort of like childhood manic situation with the both of them, where and only to sort of come back from this type of reality, they have to genuinely die in their minds and be resurrected as something
As
wholly
cyborgs.
new. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that fascinating? Because, like, even LeVar Burton says this at the end. You have no reason to be afraid, or I don't know what he says. And Troy, he doesn't say, yes, because I am a mature adult, therefore I am not afraid. He says,
Right.
well, no, it's because I'm a clone. Like,
Right.
he's gesturing towards that narrative. He's not leaving that behind. And so that's what it's just because I think regrettably that's like, isn't that Britta's arc in the episode is her refrain is really the Peter Pan refrain, which is we need to separate these two worlds, fantasy and reality. But what she learns in the episode is, no, again, the only way to really maybe find peace, the only way to arrive at the truth is to work through narrative, not attempt to circumvent it. So even Britta's arc is one where she moves or gravitates closer to the lessons that a character like Abed has to offer.
Yeah, I love that moment. That's one of my favorite moments in the show is the switch that Britta flips, where she goes from being this very like almost maternal figure to these quote unquote children, to realizing that for me to get through to them, I have to play. I'm gonna have to get in this.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna have to get in this world with them, which is awesome. I mean, it's kudos to Britta. Kudos to the writers for actually giving Britta something fucking smart to do and not making her just the dumbest person on the show anymore. It was very refreshing, I think.
Because it also demonstrates her adaptability, which I think is something that you and I also really
sure,
like about
for sure.
Britta.
Yeah.
It's like Britta is a remarkably flexible person, and she's incredibly adaptable in ways that regrettably
Right.
Winger is not, right? He has his moments, but he isn't nearly as adaptable and malleable as Britta is. And I'm afraid if it were Jeff in that situation, well, maybe it wouldn't work differently. I mean, you do remember there was that moment in season 3 when he needed to go get it's when Abed and Troy were fighting, and it was the two like pillow fort, blanket fort episodes. And he goes and gets the hats, and the security camera footage shows he actually went back to the dean's office. So I mean, Jeff has that capability. It's just not as easy or natural as it is for Britta, it seems. You're right. Like the way you described it was perfect. You know, it just on a moment she just turns.
Yeah, Jeff always has, even though I think he's doing better, he always does have like that twinge of satire that's still deep within him that he doesn't really know. That's like a defense mechanism. We all have our own things, and that's his. So yeah, I mean, I think the show does a very good job at its send off. It is as heartfelt again, like an episode of Community should be. I think sitcoms again have to ride the line of not making you want to sob, and Community is a show that is steeped heavily in silliness at points, and I think it thrives there when it really gets it going, when it gets in its groove. And this episode really is that until the end, and like you said, they're able to weave that into this like very poignant, beautiful moment at the end, where I mean, two scenes previously, like Garrett's screaming about saving the women and man children first, and Magnitude yells that he's British and not really American, and the big,
which is actually
the big
true.
fight was just
this, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's isn't he Lee from?
I was about to say
Harry Potter.
He's the announcer from those early Harry Potter movies
for the Quidditch matches.
Yeah. So
like you have that like two scenes previous. I mean, right before this happens, Britta and Hickey surf down the stairs on a fucking bookshelf on their stomachs, and it's the dumbest looking thing in the world. It's hilarious, and that happens right before this. So kudos to, I guess Sicardo was the head writer on this to really, weave all that together.
But you can also feel, and again, I'm maybe guessing or speculating at this point, but you can feel the hand of maybe an experienced, especially television director, right? Someone who knows and understands
for sure. Yeah.
TV story pacing, because I think what you're also talking about here is the kind of thing that someone like Joe Russo, not only is he good at it, but he has a lot of experience. And even when I think back to those episodes of Arrested Development, part of what I think we like so much about the best episodes of that show, it's incredibly funny. It's remarkably layered and deeply referential, but at times it's also quite saccharine. And those are all like very difficult registers to combine successfully, but those Russo episodes do that, and I think this one does too. And if we could, I put some screenshots in our show notes. I'm happy to share them if people want to see exactly what I'm referencing. There are just so many beautiful shots in this episode. This one of Britta right before the first act break. When she and Hickey converse, and like you can see the light off of whatever that thing is he drives, and she just has this interesting look on her face. The field of vision is quite narrow, so a lot of stuff is blurred, but the lighting is really interesting. Like there's some oranges and yellows. And then you mentioned that shot at the end. It's one of the few shots outdoors in this episode. But just Troy in the distance, and you're right, we really just see like these because they're in the shadows. We see these outlines of Jeff and Abed just watching him leave. And I think you're right. We're almost meant to infer there's maybe some jealousy, perhaps, some fear, longing, etc. It's all really beautiful. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, the British shot definitely has the Russo light. They use this shit all the time, and it reminds me of the best scene in a Marvel movie is in Endgame when Captain America's standing against the whole army of people, and he's like, his shield's broken in half, and you're thinking, oh my God, what's happening? And then, all the people come back in through the portals, and There's like this little orange soft light that breaks
Yeah.
over the horizon, and the Russos are great at figuring this shit out.
Yep.
They really are.
And I said field of vision earlier. I meant depth of field. My apologies. And maybe I think.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you look, John, that lighting on the left. I don't know if that's a bit of lens flare. Maybe I'm not.
It looks like a
sure.
lens flare. Yeah,
It,
yeah. It
I don't
does.
think it is, but it looks like a lens flare.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. No, this feels like because I mean, and I think this is consistent with some of the genre talk we did earlier. The Terminator, those early Terminator movies are in a lot of ways noir films. And I mean, let's be frank about something
yeah.
like cyberpunk as a genre is heavily influenced by noir, and like this feels like a noir shot, and that's part of what I like about it too. So
Oh yeah, it does. It
Oh,
does.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
the early cyberpunk is my fucking jam. We should
it's
do a
awesome.
whole episode about the first Terminator. What a boy! Oh
Oh,
boy!
it's a
What a
stunning
flick!
movie. It's a stunning
What a
movie.
flick that
Yeah.
movie is, beginning
Yeah.
to end. 10 out of 10 spectacle. You know, Arnold had a run of some pretty goddamn good movies. He really did. And then he did like the one where he has a baby. You remember that one? Remember that one where he has a
Oh,
kid?
Junior.
Yeah. Oh my god.
More liberal elites trying to convince our boys they can become girls. I'm kidding. I swear to God, I'm kidding. Please don't cancel me. Yeah, no one talks about
Oh
that
my
movie.
God.
All of this like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh stuff. I've never heard them talk about Junior, a movie from like the mid '90s where a cis man becomes pregnant.
Yeah, not just a cis
Where-
man. The Terminator. The Dutch
Where
from
does
Predator.
the baby? I haven't watched this movie. How does the baby
know.
emerge from his body?
I would say butthole, if I had to guess. Or as you and I learned, the
His
meatus.
Yeah.
Perhaps it came
Just
out of his
straight out of the
dick hole.
meatus. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So you mentioned
Anyway.
Hickey a moment ago.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Perhaps for understandable reasons, conspicuously absent from the last episode. Maybe not missed, but absent. Hickey's interesting in this episode because maybe he's certainly not as soft as Britta. I think maybe from Abed and Troy's perspective, Britta for most of the episode operates as a kind of antagonist. But I think Hickey does too, but he feels more like the kind of antagonist you would expect or anticipate from this kind of story. And again, the level of commitment here from a character who seems deeply disinterested in committing to almost anything surprised me, but it delighted me at the same time. And there's no explanation aside from what does he say? He needs money.
It's my favorite line. It's my favorite line in the
Please,
fucking...
go ahead.
I've got it right here. He said, my son's getting gay married, which is fantastic. And then he says, the flowers alone, you have no idea. Yeah, he's become a villain from a Mad Max movie in this. In a short, he's got the goggles on. He looks
does.
like he's been through a fucking desert storm, which is hilarious to me
does,
because
yeah.
they even like powder up his fucking head, which is really funny.
Yeah.
And he even has like burn marks. He's been in a hallway and he's on literally like a floor cleaner that he's attached fire extinguishers to give him a little bit of extra boost. But I think his character is really funny because he knows when to break the fantasy because they just leave Britta and he's like, oh, they just left you. They're like, you can come with me.
Yeah.
And then at the moment at the end where he gets pushed and he gets so fucking mad at her and he's like, when this is over, I'm gonna shove you back.
He does. He's really
Still plays by the rules, but he's like, I'm totally gonna
Yeah.
shove you, just so you know.
You know, you'll need to help me. I don't recall this actor's name, but I know he's worked on more maybe lofty prestige shows like Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, Jonathan Banks is his name.
Jonathan Banks.
Yeah.
Utterly terrifying. I mean, utterly
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
He
That
has,
zoom, that close up
that
zoom of him
extreme
when he like
close-up. Oh,
when he like
God.
does like the come here thing and he looks like he's salivating for these two people.
utterly
it's good.
terrifying.
Oh, it's so
Utterly
good.
terrifying.
Good stuff.
Yeah, such a wonderful bit of casting. There is something to pay attention to, John, when it's when it's just the four of them left, and Abed finally confesses that regrettably this is not a game. He actually sees lava. He seems incredibly apologetic, and I believe him that he doesn't want to have this kind of reaction to Troy leaving. But Hickey's reaction is fascinating, which is, oh, you only react like this because people placate you and pacify you, but I won't do that. That will return later, because the two of them will have a narrative together where we see Hickey maybe return to this gesture that Abed's a character who needs to be taught a lesson. And the reason why he behaves like this is because no one's had, maybe, I think Hickey would say, the stones to do anything about it.
That's fascinating. I mean, I would think, for me, when I heard that, in my brain, I thought contextually, this man's been a teacher for X number of years. He's from an old school of thought that there's always kids who act out for attention. Yeah. To me, that's what I read that as.
Yeah,
I never read that as, like, you're neurodivergent, I'm going to make fun of you.
Oh,
you need
no,
to
no.
have the sack to be better. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting, and I'm not suggesting that either. I think you're right that Hickey's he feels like the kind of character who, if he knows anything about what it means to be neurodivergent, it's probably just what he learned from watching Rain Man or something. And so he looks at someone like Abed and thinks, this kid's fine. He just needs someone to strong arm him a bit. But I think this also, and this is, I mean, for the character, quite true. How much time has he really spent interacting with these people? Very little, right? And I think if you don't know Abed, you would probably think, why do they just why? I mean, it's like I look at those nativity scenes and I don't remember the stand-up comic who said this, but why is the baby running the show? Like, why are we letting this guy make all the decisions? But, obviously once you learn who Abed is, it makes sense why he reacts the way he does. But I'm just not sure Hickey knows any of that yet.
Sure. Yeah, he's new. Yeah. So,
he's new.
Anyway, I anything else? I don't have a lot more to say. I think this is an episode that you really should experience. And if you have not seen some of the media that it's sort of paying homage to, I would highly recommend that you try to find it. If you don't have Tubi is the best app in the universe, TUBI. It's got so many free movies on it.
Oh, okay.
I think The Terminator's on it right now for free.
Okay, cool.
I would recommend you because they got to have so many cyberpunk things on there.
Yeah.
The 70s, the 80s in general were like ripe with that kind of material.
If I think about like the literary influences, I mean, cyberpunk really became a subgenre of science fiction in the 70s with writers like Philip K. Dick. So I mean, we're talking about, again, like, steampunk maybe has more of a precedent, but cyberpunk is and again, scare quotes, a relatively new genre.
It's way better.
Couple of perhaps, yeah. I don't know. I'm not here to judge, but a couple of things, John. I do like that the episode ostensibly ends with Britta, Troy, and Abed together. We were just talking about cyberpunk. A reasonable and understandable criticism of the genre is that historically it has focused on almost exclusively white characters and white male characters. And if we just think about this as an episode maybe partially inspired by cyberpunk, it's nice to see that for Community, it's two people of color and a woman at the end who really carry the narrative. So that's nice. We didn't really talk that much about the consequences of Troy leaving. And so I think that's something worth at least discussing. I mean, this is the final episode for Troy. We've spoken about him as a character who becomes a hero throughout the course of this show, throughout the course of his 4.5 seasons. Certainly more so than Jeff, maybe more so than a character like Britta. But here, John, I would just like to hear you talk about what you think about Troy Barnes, Troy leaving, what this might mean for the show, if you have any thoughts about that.
Troy is probably my favorite character in the show. He has been up through this moment. I love him dearly as a character. I think the episodes where I can always remember episodes where like I found to be problematic. You always would convince me to look at the idea of Troy emerging as the actual leader of the gang. And when you look at it that way, it's remarkable the stuff that this character has gone through. And he starts out as like this idiot jock in the very first episode, and now has become this like very almost like a tragic hero by the end of this middle of this fifth season. I will miss Troy, but I do think what this does is it gives a lot of space to allow more relationships like Jeff and Abed to bloom, or Abed and other characters in the study group. I also think opening up another seat to someone like a Hickey, or I know they're going to bring in another, I can't remember her name. There's a woman that's going to show up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in season 6, they replace Hickey with an older character named Elroy Patashnik, but they also basically replace Shirley with a character named Frankie, who is stunning, by the way. Maybe, John, I'll go ahead and say this now, like top 2 or 3 favorite Community characters.
Wow.
John, she's
So, see, yeah.
she's unbelievably funny. Like you will love her so much. I can't wait for you to meet Frankie because she's unbelievably funny.
Yeah, I think what this does for the writing crew is, it opens up a relationship that possibly could have been stagnant at this point. I don't know what else you can really do with these two characters that you haven't done. You've had them hit like all the highs and lows of nerd stuff, and at some point in any show, a relationship with two people that doesn't have much fluctuation just becomes very stagnant. Sometimes that can be like a warm blanket, but for a show like Community, where everything runs the gamut of being like very silly, very insane, to bottle episodes, to any other thing, it can, I think, grow old after a while. And maybe this gives them an out to do more interesting things.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautifully said because and I suspect a lot of people who like this show have said this, so I'll try to keep it short. Learning that Troy and Abed worked so well together may have been one of the things that really saved this show because it created a kind of coherency for this group.
For sure.
If you
Yeah, for
think
sure.
back, they tried Abed and Jeff together, and it worked to some degree, but they just didn't have the kind of camaraderie, primarily because, as we mentioned in this episode, Jeff's unwillingness to commit. What Abed really needs is someone who will commit, and that was Troy.
Sure.
But I agree with you. How long can those dynamics last? I think this show, by inserting Annie into their apartment, maybe gave that relationship a little more life. But I think you're right. At this point, the best thing to do, maybe the best thing that could happen, even though the show will fundamentally change, is to have one of those characters leave. And this is not like Pierce, right? Like, you can lose a character like Pierce and it's not necessarily a problem or a problem at all. But losing someone like Troy, because, Donald Glover is such a dynamic performer. He's so incredibly funny. He can do humor in ways that other characters on this show cannot. He can be silly and
sure.
big in ways that other actors and characters cannot. But I think this sense that it's time, right? What else are they left to do with this character, with these characters? And so I think it's a loss that needs to happen, which shows need things to end if they want them to continue, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shows need stakes, or otherwise they are very boring and go on for way too long.
Yeah.
Like, is The Simpsons still on?
I mean, The Simpsons is, but I mean, we're talking about a fundamentally different ethos there.
No, I know, but that's wild.
Yeah.
Just thinking about The
It's
Simpsons
wild,
has been
isn't
on
it?
for like
Yeah.
40 years or something. Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a fine episode, and I recommend it. This season's been my favorite season of the show so far. I think every episode's been a banger. I don't
It's
know
great. Yeah.
why they're not ranked so much higher when I read these lists of things. because they're really fucking good.
Yeah, dude, I'm not, again, here to, step on any toes, pick your metaphor. I don't get these rabid community fans who at times have quite negative things to say about seasons 5 and 6. I think the show gets better. I understand why seasons 2 and 3 are people's favorites. But I don't know. I really like 5 and 6. I think they're remarkably interesting, thoughtful, creative, dynamic bits of TV and comedy. And especially after, like, season 4, as you and I discussed, is not as bad as people think, but it's also not good. How do you resurrect a show like that? So many shows have tried. We've talked about one of them that just didn't
To a great extent.
succeed.
Yes, we have.
I mean, it's just remarkable for a show to rebound like this one has. And I completely agree with you. Small references: the boat is the Childish Tycoon,
Childish Cancun. Yeah, sorry.
and Troy leaves to come sail away by Styx.
Oh yeah, that was mentioned super early on, wasn't it?
Super,
Oh
like
my
like
God.
maybe second episode of the show.
That's
So,
wild.
yeah. So
Yeah, thinking about this season 5 of this versus season 5 of Arrested Development. Oh my God. Boy, oh boy. I don't even remember what happened in season 5 of Arrested Development.
no,
Fake Block? Was that in season 5? Was it Fake Block?
Fake Block, I think, was season 4, and then it as we discussed, Hurwitz chose not to just move forward, but just continue
He
to
carried
linger.
it over.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, and it became a big deal because that's right. They sell Fake Block in the wall to the Chinese. I don't know. Anyway, it's a
think
fucking
to the
wild thing.
Japanese, maybe. Yeah, it's
Oh my
it's
God,
not
what a
great.
show!
Not the first time the Blues try to deceive Asian businessmen. If you remember from season 3, maybe, where they built the tiny town with the mole.
That is one of the best episodes of any television show
I'm a mole.
of all time.
I'm a
Moly,
mole.
moly, moly, moly. then George Michael and his fucking jetpack. I can't even, dude. What a good episode of TV that is. Oh my God. Oh, they do the Godzilla stuff.
Oh,
and even the surrogate's like,
Yeah.
George Hughes like, in the background. Oh man.
And then they have
Wonderful.
so many wonderful moments when you think you think a character's making a Godzilla reference and they're not. It's like Lucille's angry because all the vodka's gone and she makes a dragon noise.
That's awesome. Is that in season 3?
Yeah, that's season 3.
What a remarkably good episode. I'm going to have to seek that out and watch that episode soon.
Because it's
anyway, this is not our Arrested Development podcast, although we have done that if you want to go way back in the catalog. It's there.
It's post what's the Charlize Theron character? What's her name?
Mr. F. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Mr. F.
Rita.
So I think it's post Rita, I think. And Michael's super sad. So he gets the guitar.
Oh, yeah, he does. What a fucking wild show. What a show.
Oh, God. Okay, John, let us transition to some of our segments. John,
Yeah.
I think we both probably have the same one, but who makes the Dean's List for you here on maybe graduation day for
I don't know.
one of our
I feel like
one
you
of our
would pick
students?
Britta. I picked Troy Barnes.
Yeah, mine's Troy. It's same thing.
Yeah.
It's Troy.
It's sad to see him go. I assume here he's probably Gambino's taking off, and he also, I would assume, is about to start making solo. I would think.
Yeah, and I think Atlanta comes in a couple of years.
And Atlanta, okay.
But
So-
basically, like you're right. Like his solo artistic efforts, not single film efforts. It's weird when you call a movie solo, but he's becoming a solo artist, but not in that exclusive.
I also
sense.
saw this week that he's basically becoming showrunner of the Lando show. for Disney Plus. So it's like the
What's
only
that?
Star
Okay.
Wars property I give a fuck about now. I haven't
really?
watched any of this stuff.
I don't know
I don't know
anything
what's
that's
happening
happening,
with
yeah.
the Baby Yoda guy. I don't know. Is that dude talking yet? I hope when he does talk, it's just Gilbert Gottfried. I hope they ADR everything with Gilbert Gottfried's voice.
He's dead, so I don't.
I know. Dude, AI can do a lot of shit. Anyway, Colin,
Sure.
what's the next segment?
Oh, this is where we check the syllabus, John, and we identify our favorite bit of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. What do you got?
Oh, this is hard. I mean, like, the genre of all the movies I love
So much,
is what I'll
yeah.
say. I would say I like the gang names. I like the Locker Boys. I like the Chair Walkers. I like how realized all this insanity is in their culture. That's my favorite thing. What about you?
So mine is when Britta and Jeff are fighting with the plungers, and Jeff's clearly trying to engage Britta in some of the like banter that often happens when people have these kinds of fights. Like think
Sure,
back to your
right.
Revenge of the Sith. Like Anakin, this isn't you. And it's like, I think the Jedi
Right.
are evil, like that. And she just won't do it right. So I think that's
very
why-
bad at it.
And she
She's
just
very
shouts
bad at it, yeah.
floor several
Floor.
times. So yeah, John, best lines.
Oh, I already said my Buzz Hickey line, which is my son's getting gay married. That's what a Pierce line that is.
That is,
But he's
yeah.
he's sweet about it because he's trying to get the
He
money.
is.
You know,
I think that's the point.
That's the difference.
That's the difference. Yeah.
when the game is over, I'm going to shove you back. That's a Buzz Hickey line, which I fucking loved so much. And then this is my favorite. This is the line that ends the episode when he's asking LeVar Burton questions about Star Trek, and he says, "Why don't they call it Planet Trek? You never go to a star.
That's a good
Not
quote.
one episode. So good. What about you, buddy?
You stay back, Britta. I'm not afraid to push a girl into make-believe lava. Into make-believe lava. In fact, it's been my primary strategy." That's a Duncan line. This is an Annie line. Super funny. Mama Mahogany, feast your feet on that stack of sticks.
It's so crazy. Annie's wild in this episode.
Yes. Chang shouts, "Locker boys, earn your M&Ms." That's really funny.
Oh yeah, so good, so good.
Floor, what? That's who's there. Yeah, but it's for you. That's still Jeff. Britta. And then Britta shouts, "Who's there, bitch? Floor. Floor." Oh, this is a Starburns line. $50,000. That's 50,000 lottery tickets. Stunning.
Dumble Starburns.
I had a dream like this, but it was sexual. That's something Troy says. Very funny.
Yeah.
I think when Britta's on the ball, maybe. Anywho, I don't think the lava's here because you're leaving. I think it's here because I won't let go. That's an Abed line. Well,
yeah.
yeah, John, that is our conversation. Yeah, for season 5, episode 5, Geothermal Escapism. John, as we mentioned earlier, but it's worth repeating, we have a Patreon page.
Yeah, we do. We have a Patreon. For $3 a month, you become... For $3 a month, you get the exclusive content, where you can hear an episode that no one else can hear unless you're a patron on our Patreon. One a month. It's good stuff. I don't know what we're talking about in the month of August yet. I have some ideas.
Yeah, we also have some requests maybe that we could do.
We have some requests. There's some things to do.
There are things
For $7 a month, you become producer of the show, and we talk about you every single episode. And you get a sticker of the show also. Above that, you become the executive super amazing producer. You get a t-shirt, a sticker. We talk about how much we like you every episode. You get the exclusive content. You can come over, and we can play The Floor is Lava in my workshop. There's a lot of places around here that you could jump around. So,
Yeah, freshly cleaned and organized workspace, John.
It is. It looks phenomenal. I come in every time I come in now. I'm just so happy. I'm so refreshed and relieved. There's nothing in the floor. I have a couch I can sit on. It's very nice. Colin, let's thank our patrons, shall we?
Yeah, so thank you to the following patrons of the Hop-Ons podcast. Thank you to Katana, Crindy, wonderful names for our patrons here, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Lars, Rob, Robin, Karen, and Andrew. And John's right, it's the first link in the show notes. If you want Hop-Ons podcast merchandise, that is the second link in the show notes to our Threadless page. And John, if someone were so inclined to rate and review the podcast, what would you say? What would I say?
I would say it's really great because it helps the show get noticed if you rate and review us, and we will read your review here on the show. And I'm going to read one from our new patron, Katana K.
Yeah.
Left this. Great podcast, 5 stars. You know, from the outset, that's all you need to say, but I'm going to go on and read more.
But that's okay. Keep going. Yes.
I discovered this podcast while on a long road trip and binge listens to all the AD-related content while driving over 6,000 miles. Oh, my God. That's a lot of us in your ears.
You know, we'll talk about this in just a quick second. I think we would make a good road trip podcast. And
I would hope so.
Yeah.
We're fun. We're funny. Anyway, absolutely love these guys. Thank you. Very funny and insightful and willing to criticize things without the nostalgia goggles. It's almost like having real friends. Aw.
No, that's nice.
We'll be your friend, Katana K, if you live in the Tri-Cities or Appalachian Highlands. Other than that, we're far distance friends. So,
yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. That's a wonderful review.
Wonderful review, John. But here's my thing, right? So
okay.
I've tried listening to podcasts on maybe long driving trips, and sometimes I get bored. I think, and this is a compliment, you and I have such remarkably different voices. It's impossible for our voices just to blend together, which is one of the things that bores me about other podcasts that I like, when it's almost like I don't know who's talking. No one would mistake you for me or me for you. I think that's one thing.
This is me. Hi, I'm Colin Cox. I read books more than John does.
That's exactly what my voice
I wake up every
day
and stretch for 2 hours. I stretch and I read at the same time. I know how to balance books on every part of my body while I stretch. I'm Colin Cox. I love eggs. I eat more eggs than you can imagine. When I go into the Kroger's, they say, "Here comes Eggman." That's a throwback to when we said Kroger's at the beginning.
I was about to say, you said Kroger's. For some reason, I sound like Ben Shapiro when you do my voice, and I don't think I like that.
Those are your words. I didn't. That's not.
Oh,
that's not me. So, no, Ben Shapiro's more up here. Hey, what's going on with this Barbie movie? I went in there and I walked out. And everybody tried to throw rocks at me. That's Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, but so our voices are quite different. Our episodes, I mean, like the longest episode I think we have is maybe 1 hour and 15 minutes. So
yeah, like 1:15.
I think they're easily digestible without being like just straight, summary episodes. And I think, at times, I think one of us at least has a sense of humor, according to people who leave reviews. So I think that helps as well.
Yeah. I need to learn how to tell jokes. I just don't know.
Oh, yeah. No, you're the one with the sense of humor. I think
okay. All right. Okay.
I'm the woke scold. So
I reversed it. Yeah, I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you. Until next time, thank you for the Hop-Ons podcast. My name is John Phelps.
My name is Colin Cox.
Okay. Bye, buddy.
See you later.